Chapter 1. The Silence of the Lamb's Wool. The first thing I registered was the oppressive weight of lamb's wool. It was the material of my blazer, a deep charcoal gray, impeccably tailored and utterly suffocating. I hadn't worn it in a lifetime, literally. The second sensation was the chime of sterling silver against bone china, a delicate sound that scraped against my raw nerves like a rusty key in a lock. I knew that sound. It was the sound of my own damnation. I opened my eyes. The dining room of the Vaughn estate unfolded before me, a portrait of opulent dread. A crystal chandelier, a monstrosity of 1,000 teardrops, bled warm light onto the mahogany table. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and old money, a perfume I associated with decay. Across the polished surface, gleaming like a frozen lake, sat my 3 sisters. My executioners. Serafina, the eldest, was a queen surveying her domain. Her silver blonde hair was pulled back into a severe chignon, not a single strand daring to defy her will. Her eyes, a glacial blue, were fixed on some distant point of corporate conquest. She was the one who signed the papers, the one who declared me a non-entity and froze the accounts, leaving me to starve in a city that bore our family's name on half its buildings. Next to her was Annalise, the star. Her beauty was a carefully constructed weapon, all soft smiles and doe-eyed vulnerability that graced magazine covers and silver screens. She was the one who fed the narrative to the wolves, who painted me as a monster to her legions of adoring fans, turning public opinion into a blade that flayed me alive. And then Isabella, Dr. Vaughn. Her slender, steady hands, the hands of a gifted surgeon, were resting calmly beside her plate. Her expression was one of clinical observation, perpetually diagnosing the world around her. She was the one who watched me waste away, who heard me beg for the heart medication she knew I needed, and told me it was all in my head. The ultimate gaslighting, delivered with a gentle, professional smile. A ghost at my own feast. This was the beginning, again. My chest tightened, a familiar phantom pain that felt more real than the solid chair beneath me. I was 18 again, but my soul was ancient, worn smooth by the friction of a horrific death and an unwanted rebirth. Just breathe, Caleb, I told myself, the thought a weak whisper in the storm of my mind. Survive the dinner. That's the only goal, just survive. Then a voice, smooth as aged whiskey and just as poisonous, slid into the room. I hope everyone saved room for the main course. I made something special, just for Caleb. Leo. He entered from the kitchen, a vision of counterfeit perfection. He wore a simple black turtleneck and trousers, yet he moved with an owner's grace, a golden retriever's charm masking the wolf beneath. He carried a silver platter, a proud smile on his face as he placed it in the center of the table. The lid was still on, a polished dome reflecting the distorted faces of my sisters, their expressions ranging from Serafina's cool indifference to Annalise's eager anticipation. My heart didn't just hurt, it seized. I knew what was under that lid. Ah, the pistachio-crusted lamb, the thought bloomed in my mind, not with surprise but with the weary resignation of a man watching a rerun of his own execution. I remember this, my favorite dish. Or it was. Before I learned that a severe pistachio allergy developed in my late teens feels a lot like a heart attack. The first time, it was an accident, an honest mistake. But the second time was last time. A strange tingling sensation started at the base of my skull. It felt like a current, a faint hum. I ignored it, focusing on the memory that played out behind my eyes. I remember lying on the cold tile of a hospital bathroom, my throat closing, my skin on fire with hives. Leo was there, patting my back with feigned concern. "Just a panic attack, buddy," he'd said. Isabella had agreed. "You're under a lot of stress, Caleb. Your anxiety is manifesting physically." Serafina was just annoyed at the disruption. Annalise was embarrassed, and I, gasping for air, believed them. I let them convince me my own body was a liar. "What's wrong, Caleb?" It was Annalise's voice, pulling me from the memory. Her brow was furrowed with what looked like genuine concern. "You look pale. Are you feeling all right?" I stared at her, my mouth dry. I couldn't speak. The shock of rebirth was a vice around my vocal cords. Suddenly, Serafina's fork clattered against her plate. It was a sharp, jarring sound in the otherwise quiet room. Her glacial eyes were no longer distant. They were fixed on me, a flicker of profound confusion in their depths. At the same time, Isabella's hand, which had been resting by her plate, went completely still. Her clinical gaze sharpened, losing its detached quality and becoming intensely, unnervingly focused. She wasn't looking at me, but through me, as if listening for a sound no one else could hear. What was happening? "Come on, Caleb," Leo coaxed, his smile unwavering as he reached for the platter's lid. "I worked on this all afternoon. I even got the recipe from Chef Antoine, your favorite." "Don't lift it," my mind screamed, a raw, desperate plea. "He's going to offer it to me. He'll put it on my plate, and if I refuse, he'll look wounded. He'll turn to them, his eyes brimming with false tears, and say, 'I just wanted to do something nice for my best friend.' And they'll fall for it. They always do. They'll see me as the ungrateful, paranoid little brother, and him as the victim. It's the first brick in the wall he builds between me and them, a foundation of my supposed insanity." The lid came off. The rich, nutty aroma of roasted pistachios filled the air. It was a symphony of suspended silver. Serafina's wineglass, halfway to her lips, froze. Isabella's hand clenched into a fist on the white tablecloth. Annalise's camera-ready smile didn't just falter, it collapsed entirely, her face paling to the color of the lilies on the table. They were all staring not at the lamb, but at me, their faces masks of dawning, inexplicable horror. It was as if they had heard me, as if my silent, internal scream had echoed in the hollows of their own skulls. The tingling at the base of my skull intensified, a live wire humming with a terrible new energy. Leo, oblivious, beamed. "See, pistachio-crusted lamb, just how you like it." He picked up a serving fork and knife, ready to carve. "A slice for the man of the hour?" The room was silent, but my mind was a cacophony. Man of the hour of my slow-motion demise. This is where he cements his position as the thoughtful, caring friend, the replacement son. This is where he proves my jealousy is irrational. This is the first dose of poison, both literal and metaphorical. And you three, you'll watch me choke, and you'll call it drama. I looked from Leo's expectant face to the stunned, horrified faces of my sisters. For the first time in 2 lives, I saw something other than pity or scorn in their eyes. I saw fear. They were afraid of me, or more accurately, of what was coming from me. I pushed my chair back slowly, the legs scraping against the marble floor. The sound was deafening in the charged silence. I stood up, my body feeling heavy, ancient. "Caleb?" Leo's voice was laced with confusion now. The performance was beginning. I looked at him, then at my sisters, one by one. I didn't need to speak. My thoughts were apparently doing all the talking. I turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving the scent of pistachio and terror behind me. I didn't run. I walked with the leaden steps of a man who had nowhere left to go. As I reached the grand staircase, a final, bitter thought surfaced, clear and cold as a shard of glass, and I aimed it squarely at the 3 women sitting frozen at the table. "Are you enjoying the show? Because I can assure you, it's only just begun." Chapter 2: A Symphony of Cracks. The days that followed the disastrous dinner were a study in strained silence. The Vaughn estate, usually humming with the quiet efficiency of staff and the low thrum of my sister's ambitions, now felt like a mausoleum. They avoided me. When our paths did cross in the vast, sun-drenched hallways, they would startle like deer, their eyes wide and haunted before they'd find a sudden, urgent reason to be in another room. I didn't mind. I craved the solitude. I took refuge in my bedroom, a space that was more of a gilded cage than a sanctuary. The lambswool blazer from that night was crumpled in a heap in the corner, a dead thing I couldn't bring myself to touch. Most of the time, I just sat by the window, watching the manicured gardens blur into a sea of green, my mind a relentless, churning vortex. The oral link, this bizarre one-way telepathy, was constant, a low hum that spiked whenever one of them was near. I learned to weaponize it without trying. It was my only defense. A week after the pistachio incident, a storm rolled in. Not just rain, but a full-blown tempest, the kind that rips shutters from their hinges and turns the sky a bruised purple. The first clap of thunder was a gunshot in the quiet house. I flinched, my body instantly rigid. My heart began to pound a frantic, uneven rhythm against my ribs. It was raining like this the night I died. The thought wasn't voluntary. It was a reflex, a memory clawing its way to the surface. The rental shack I was living in had a tin roof. The sound was deafening. like being trapped inside a drum while a giant beats it. The door didn't lock properly, so it rattled with every gust of wind, a constant threat of intrusion. I wrapped my arms around myself, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The window pane was cool against my forehead, but inside, I was burning up with the memory. I was in my wheelchair, shivering, not from the cold, but from the pain. The heart medication Isabella had cut me off from. The withdrawal was agony. It felt like my chest was being crushed. I tried to call for help, but my phone line had been cut for non-payment, a final little fuck you from Serafina's accounting department. I just sat there, listening to the rain, waiting for my heart to finally give out. And it did. The last thing I saw was the flickering, bare bulb on the ceiling, swaying in the draft from the broken door. A soft knock came at my bedroom door. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The door creaked open. It was Isabella. She stood in the doorway, her face pale in the dim light, her usual clinical composure completely gone. She was holding a glass of water and a small white pill in her palm. "Caleb," she said, her voice barely a whisper, I heard the thunder. I thought you might need something. For the anxiety." I looked at the pill in her hand, and a wave of black, bitter humor washed over me. "Something for the anxiety? Is that what you're calling it now? Last time it was a psychosomatic manifestation. You gave me sugar pills, Isabella. Placebos. You, a doctor, watched your brother die and charted it as a mental breakdown. Are you offering me real medicine this time, or just another spoonful of condescending bullshit?" Isabella's hand trembled so violently that the pill fell to the floor, rolling under the leg of a heavy oak dresser. The glass of water slipped from her other hand, shattering on the hardwood, the sound as sharp and final as a bone snapping. She didn't even seem to notice. She just stared at me, her eyes wide with a fresh wave of horror. She took a staggering step back, her hand flying to her mouth as if to physically stifle a scream. Then she turned and fled, her footsteps echoing down the hall. One down, two to go. Leo, of course, was a constant, smiling presence. He seemed to have completely forgotten my rejection of his special dinner. He played his part to perfection, oozing concern and camaraderie. He'd try to coax me into a game of chess, suggest a movie, or talk about the new sports car he was helping Serafina pick out. He was weaving his web, thread by silken thread, and he was too arrogant to notice the flies were no longer buzzing mindlessly toward it. His next move came 2 days later. Annalise had a major audition for a historical drama, a role she coveted. It was a project helmed by a famously difficult avant-garde director. The script was dense, the part emotionally taxing. "I'm so nervous," she confessed over a tense breakfast I was forced to attend. She was picking at a grapefruit, her eyes shadowed with worry. Director Alistair is a genius, but he's brutal. He's known for breaking actors down to get the performance he wants. Leo placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "You'll be brilliant, Annalise. You always are. Just be yourself." "Liar," my mind instantly supplied, cold and clear. He doesn't want her to get the part. He knows Alistair's last 3 leading ladies ended up in rehab. Annalise getting this role would make her powerful and independent outside of his sphere of influence. He needs her dependent, leaning on him. So, he's going to sabotage the audition. He's already done it. Annalise flinched at Leo's touch, pulling her arm back as if burned. She glanced at me, her eyes wide and questioning. "He switched the audition scripts in her portfolio last night," my internal narrator continued, dispassionate as a news anchor. "The one she's been rehearsing is for a different character in the same film, a minor, comedic relief role. When she performs it for Alistair, she'll look like an unprepared, arrogant fool who couldn't even be bothered to read the correct pages. Her confidence will be shattered, and Leo will be there to pick up the pieces, telling her the director is a monster and she's better off without the part. He'll be her savior." Annalise shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly. I just remembered something. I need to double-check my portfolio." She all but ran from the room, leaving a baffled Leo and a stone-faced Serafina in her wake. Leo turned to me, his brow furrowed in a perfect pantomime of concern. "Is she okay? She seems so on edge." I just looked at him, saying nothing. I didn't need to. An hour later, a shriek of pure fury erupted from the library. It was Annalise. It wasn't the sound of a starlet's frustration. It was the raw, primal scream of someone who has just stared into the abyss and seen a familiar face smiling back. The cracks were becoming chasms. They could no longer dismiss the pistachio incident as a fluke, or my storm-induced panic as mere anxiety. My thoughts were providing a real-time, unerringly accurate script of Leo's manipulations. The details were too specific, the predictions too precise. They were trapped in a horror movie where the victim was narrating the killer's every move before he made it. That evening, I was walking past the solarium when I heard their voices. My sisters. They were huddled together, their voices low and urgent. For the first time since my rebirth, they were united, not in their adoration of Leo, but in their shared, creeping dread. He knew, Annalise was saying, her voice trembling. Caleb knew. The script was switched, Isabella, exactly like he said. And the pill, Isabella whispered, her voice ragged. The way he looked at it, at me, it was like he was remembering something I'd done, something unforgivable. There was a long pause, then Serafina's voice, cold and sharp as ever, but laced with a new unfamiliar thread of fear. This is impossible. It defies all logic, but we cannot ignore it. 2 incidents, both predicted with perfect accuracy. We have a problem, and I don't think the problem is Caleb. I leaned against the cool marble wall outside, a ghost listening to his own eulogy being rewritten. The foundation of their world was crumbling, brick by painstaking brick, and all I had to do was think. My trauma had become their crucible, my pain, their punishment. It wasn't vengeance, it was something far more intimate, far more terrifying. It was a reckoning. Chapter 3. The Doctor's Diagnosis. Isabella, ever the woman of science, could not let the impossible remain unexplained. Where Serafina saw a threat to be managed and Annalise saw a terrifying ghost story unfolding in real time, Isabella saw a phenomenon to be dissected. She approached my existence with the same methodical rigor she would a baffling medical case, determined to find a rational, clinical explanation for the madness that had infected the Vaughn household. Her first attempt was a direct assault. She cornered me in the library, a space that smelled of leather and decaying paper, a room I'd once loved. She held a sleek silver tablet, her face set in a mask of professional concern that I knew was a lie. "Caleb," she began, her tone gentle, rehearsed. "Annalise and Serafina are worried about you. I am too. You've been withdrawn, and you seem to be experiencing, well, a significant amount of distress. I've taken the liberty of scheduling an appointment for you with Dr. Alastair Finch. He's the best neuropsychiatrist in the country. We just want to make sure you're okay." Dr. Finch. The name hit me like a physical blow. Dr. Alastair Finch, my mind echoed, the thought dripping with a venom I couldn't conceal. Of course, the company man. The psychiatrist the Vaughn board keeps on retainer to sign off on inconvenient truths. He's the one you brought in last time, after I tried to tell Serafina that Leo was liquidating a subsidiary and pocketing the cash. Finch spent an hour with me, asked me about my childhood, then wrote a 5-page report diagnosing me with paranoid schizophrenia and delusions of persecution. It was that report that gave Serafina the justification she needed to have me declared mentally incompetent. It was the nail in my coffin. Isabella's breath hitched. The tablet in her hand slipped, and she fumbled to catch it. Her professional mask was gone, replaced by a stark, naked guilt. She had come in here to diagnose me, to put me in a neat little box labeled mentally ill, and instead, my thoughts had diagnosed her. Her methods, her complicity, her betrayal. "You want to make sure I'm okay?" The bitter internal monologue continued, a torrent she was powerless to stop. "You, the sister who held my medical power of attorney, the one who knew about my stress-induced arrhythmia and still signed off on Finch's report. You, who switched my beta blockers with aspirin because Leo convinced you my episodes were just bids for attention. You want to talk about my distress, Isabella? Let's talk about yours. Let's talk about the Hippocratic oath you shattered into a million pieces." "Stop," she whispered, her voice cracking. It wasn't a command, it was a plea. She took a step back, pressing a hand to her temple, as if to block out the noise, my noise. "Please, just stop." I just stared at her, my expression blank. I wasn't doing anything. This was all her. Her and this cursed connection. She had wanted a diagnosis. She was getting one. She fled the library, leaving me in the silence. But it wasn't a victory. It was just another rotation of the wheel of my own private hell. Exposing her past sins didn't alleviate my trauma. It just gave it an audience of one, trapped in a theater of her own making. After that, Isabella's approach changed. She stopped trying to cure me and started trying to understand the phenomenon itself. The house became her laboratory. She'd leave objects in my path, a photograph from our childhood, a specific book, a piece of music, and then observe from a distance, watching for my reaction, listening for the inevitable flood of memory that would follow. She left a small, framed photo of the three of us on the beach as children on the mantelpiece. Annalise had her arms thrown around my neck, and I was laughing, a gap-toothed, genuine smile. That was the summer before Dad died. The memory surfaced, bittersweet and sharp. He was the one who took that picture. He used to call me his little anchor, the one who kept his 3 wild yachts from sailing too far out to sea. After the funeral, Serafina took over the company. Annalise threw herself into acting classes, and you, Isabella, buried yourself in medical school. You all found new harbors. I was just adrift. That was the last time we were a family. The last time you looked at me like a brother instead of an obligation or a liability. From down the hall, I heard a soft, choked sob. It was cut off quickly, but the sound hung in the air. Isabella became more desperate. Her scientific mind was grappling with the patently unscientific. She started leaving medical journals on tables, pages bookmarked to articles on telepathy, on collective consciousness, on trauma-induced psychic events. She was searching for a framework, a precedent, anything to explain how my consciousness had become a broadcast system. One afternoon, I found her in her home office, surrounded by brain scans, not mine, hers, and Serafina's and Annalise's. They were illuminated on a large light board, a triptych of glowing gray matter. She was pointing at a specific region on all 3 scans with a trembling finger, the temporal parietal junction. "It doesn't make any sense," she was muttering to herself, her voice raw. "The activity levels are anomalous, all 3 of us. It's like there's a resonance, a receiver." She didn't know I was standing in the doorway. "You're looking in the wrong place," I thought, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. "It's not in your brains. The anomaly isn't you, it's me, or what's left of me. You think this is a connection? It's not. It's an echo. When you 3 stood by and let me die, you didn't just break a brother, you broke a bond, a fundamental one. Nature abhors a vacuum. All you're hearing now is the ghost of that connection, screaming in the empty space you created." Isabella spun around, her eyes wild. She saw me, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that she had heard that last thought as clearly as if I'd shouted it. The blood drained from her face. The last vestiges of her scientific skepticism crumbled into dust. This wasn't a case study. This wasn't a neurological quirk. This was a haunting. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words ragged, torn from the deepest part of her. "Caleb, I'm so sorry." It was the first time one of them had apologized. It meant nothing. An apology couldn't unring the bell, couldn't restart a heart, couldn't erase the memory of the tin roof and the rattling door. From that moment on, Isabella became my shadow, my unwilling confidant. She stopped trying to fix me and started trying to protect me. She'd intercept Leo when he approached me, running interference with a newfound, fierce determination. She began secretly documenting his movements, his phone calls, cross-referencing his actions with the predictions she was hearing in her head. She had been the one who perfected the art of gaslighting me into believing I was insane. Now, she was the first one to truly, completely believe me. The irony was a blade twisting in my gut. The doctor had finally accepted her diagnosis, but the patient was already dead. I was just the ghost he'd left behind. Chapter 4. The Star's Standing Ovation. Annalise lived her life in the warm glow of a perpetual spotlight. Her currency was perception, her kingdom the hearts and minds of the public. She wielded her fame with the casual grace of a fencer, deflecting scandals and amplifying praise. So when the crisis hit, it was an attack on her very foundations. It started as a whisper online, a single anonymous blog post. The headline was poison-tipped: "Annalise Vaughn, the Charity Queen's Dirty Secret." The article alleged that a significant portion of the funds from Annalise's signature charity, Annie's Arts, which provided arts education for underprivileged children, was being funneled into vanity projects and exorbitant administrative fees. It was a lie, but a well-crafted one, complete with doctored financial statements and a fake whistleblower interview. Within hours, the whisper was a roar. The story was picked up by gossip rags, then by more reputable news outlets. Annie's scandal was trending. Her life's work, her carefully cultivated image as a philanthropist, was being torched in a global bonfire. She holed up in her suite, a gilded cage on the west wing of the estate, refusing to see anyone. The calls from her publicist were frantic. Her agent was apoplectic. Sponsors were threatening to pull out. And through it all, Leo was her rock. He was a constant, calming presence, screening her calls, bringing her tea, murmuring reassurances. He was the valiant knight protecting the besieged princess. I watched it unfold from a distance, a silent, unwilling observer. Isabella, now my nervous, guilt-ridden shadow, would give me updates, her face etched with a new kind of terror. "It's a professional hit job, Caleb," she told me one evening, pacing the length of my room. "The documents are fakes, but they're good. It will take weeks for our forensics team to definitively prove it. By then, the damage will be done. She's not handling it well." Of course she isn't, the thought rose in me, cold and heavy. This is a repeat performance. A slightly different script, but the same director. Last time it was me, the delusional, jealous brother. This time it's her charity. The target is different, but the goal is the same. Isolate Yvonne, break them down, and rebuild them in his own image, completely dependent on him. Isabella stopped pacing, her hand instinctively going to her temple. She was learning to brace herself for the impact of my thoughts. He's behind it all. My mind continued its relentless narration. The blog was registered through a proxy server in Eastern Europe, paid for with an untraceable cryptocurrency. The whistleblower is a struggling actor Leo hired a month ago, a man with a gambling problem and a desperate need for cash. The doctored financials were created by a disgraced accountant who owes Leo a favor from years ago. He's the arsonist and the firefighter, the one who set the blaze and the one who will heroically put it out. "How?" Isabella breathed, her voice barely audible. "How could you possibly know those details?" I just looked out the window, because I've seen this movie before. The climax of Leo's performance was worthy of an award. 2 days into the media siege, he called a family meeting in the Grand Salon. Serafina was there, her face a mask of cold fury. Annalise sat huddled on a sofa, looking small and broken, a fallen star. Leo stood before the fireplace, his expression grave. "I've been doing some digging," he announced, his voice filled with righteous indignation. "I couldn't stand by and watch Annalise be attacked like this. I called in some favors, tracked some digital footprints, and I found him." He tapped his phone, and a man's face appeared on the large television screen mounted on the wall. He was a haggard-looking man in his late 40s. "His name is Martin Kale," Leo said. "A disgruntled former employee of the charity's accounting firm, fired for incompetence 2 years ago. It seems he held a grudge." He then presented a beautifully packaged file of evidence, screenshots of Kale's bitter social media posts, a flimsy connection to the blog's IP address, and a conveniently signed confession Kale had apparently provided after a few hours of Leo's persuasion. It was a masterpiece of misdirection, a believable scapegoat, a simple motive, a clean resolution. Annalise looked up, a flicker of hope in her tear-filled eyes. You did this? For me?" "Of course," Leo said, moving to her side, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I would do anything for you, for this family." "Don't fall for it, Annalise," my mind pleaded, a desperate, silent scream aimed down the hall. "It's a lie. It's all a lie. The real evidence, the proof of Leo's involvement, is on a burn phone he keeps in the false bottom of his humidor. The password is the date his family's company was destroyed by ours, 110488. He's going to destroy the fake evidence against Kale to show his loyalty, and then you'll be in his debt forever. He'll own you." In the salon, Annalise stiffened under Leo's hand. For a moment, she was utterly still. Isabella, standing near the door, held her breath. Serafina, ever the pragmatist, was already looking at the legal ramifications, but even she paused, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere. Then Annalise looked up at Leo. The broken, grateful expression was gone. In its place was a look of crystalline clarity, a horrifying, profound understanding. It was the look of someone seeing a monster's true face for the very first time. She remembered. She remembered how easily she'd believed the narrative spun about me. She remembered turning her back while her fans, fueled by her silence, tore me to shreds online. They had called me a parasite, a liar, a freak. They'd doxed my location, sent death threats, and she had let them. She had watched my social execution from her ivory tower and called it protecting the family brand. The spotlight she had so carefully curated for herself suddenly felt like a harsh, unforgiving interrogation lamp, and she was the one on trial. Slowly, deliberately, she removed Leo's hand from her shoulder as if it were a venomous snake. "Thank you, Leo," she said, her voice eerily calm. "You've been incredibly helpful. I think I know exactly what needs to be done." She stood up, no longer the broken starlet, but a woman forged in a new, terrifying fire. She walked over to Isabella, and the two sisters shared a look that was deeper than blood, a silent pact of shared guilt and dawning resolve. Then Annalise looked toward the doorway, straight at me, though I was hidden in the shadows of the hall. Her eyes weren't accusatory, they were filled with a terrible gut-wrenching shame. She had stood on the stage of public opinion and let them throw stones at her own brother. Now she had been handed the stones herself, aimed at a new target. And this time, she knew who the real villain was. The show was far from over, but the lead actress had finally read the correct script. Chapter 6. The Vaughn Foundation Gala. The Vaughn Foundation Gala was the crown jewel of the city's social calendar, an annual spectacle of power and philanthropy. The grand ballroom of the Oak Haven Hotel was transformed into a celestial wonderland, with shimmering silver silks draped from the ceiling and thousands of tiny lights twinkling like a captive galaxy. The air hummed with the murmur of 100 conversations, the clinking of crystal, and the scent of expensive perfume mingling with hothouse flowers. It was a perfect illusion, a beautiful lie, and tonight it was the stage for an execution. Leo was in his element, a radiant sun at the center of this glittering universe. He stood beside Serafina, his hand possessively at the small of her back, greeting senators and CEOs with an easy, practiced charm. He wore a custom tuxedo, the lapels shimmering under the lights. He looked every bit the prince consort. The man who had won not just the princess, an actress, and a doctor, but the entire kingdom. He was triumphant. I was there, a ghost at the feast. My sisters had insisted. "You need to be here, Caleb," Serafina had told me, her voice devoid of its usual command, replaced by a quiet, grim resolve. "You need to see this." I was seated at their table just to the side of the main stage, dressed in a suit that felt like a costume, a silent, unwilling guest of honor at a party celebrating my own vindication. It brought me no joy. I just wanted it to be over. "He's so confident," my mind observed with a clinical detachment. "He thinks this is his coronation. He's already told Serafina he wants the official announcement of their engagement and his appointment to COO to be the night's grand finale. He's picturing the headlines now, power couple to lead Vaughn Industries into the future. He has no idea he's the fatted calf, prepped and ready for the slaughter." At the head table, Serafina gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. Isabella, seated to my left, took a quiet, steadying breath. Annalise across from me met my gaze for a fleeting second, her eyes filled with a universe of apology and fear. The overture was over. The opera was about to begin. Annalise was the first to take the stage. She was a vision in emerald green, a stark contrast to the room's silver decor. She looked out at the sea of powerful faces, her own face projected onto the massive screens flanking the stage. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the ballroom. "For years, this gala has been about celebrating the good work of the Vaughn Foundation. It's been about shining a light on those in need. Tonight, however, we're going to be shining a light in a slightly different direction. We're going to talk about the nature of trust and the anatomy of a lie." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Leo, standing beside the stage, frowned slightly, the first hint of unease marring his perfect facade. "A lie, you see," Annalise continued, her gaze sweeping the room before landing squarely on Leo, "is not just a statement. It is a performance. And as an actress, I can tell you that the most convincing performances are often given by those who truly believe their own fiction." On the screens behind her, a photo appeared. It was the haggard face of Martin Cale, the man Leo had framed for the attack on her charity. This is the man who was accused of trying to destroy my reputation, a convenient scapegoat. But the real director of that performance is far more talented, and he is in this room tonight. The murmur grew louder. Leo's smile was gone, replaced by a tight, strained line. He started to move toward the stage, but a hand on his arm stopped him. It was one of Vaughn Industries' security guards, materializing from the shadows, his expression polite but unyielding. Before the confusion could boil over, Isabella walked to the podium. She tapped the microphone, the sound echoing sharply. My sister speaks of performance. I am a woman of science. I deal in diagnostics. A few months ago, a sickness began to infect my family. A sickness of manipulation, of gaslighting, of pathological deceit. The source? A sociopath. A textbook case, in fact. Lack of empathy, a grandiose sense of self-worth, and a remarkable talent for mirroring the emotions of others to achieve a desired goal. Behind her, the screens changed. They now showed redacted psychiatric reports, diagrams of narcissistic personality disorder, and most damningly, a series of short, secretly recorded video clips. One showed Leo coaching the whistleblower actor on what to say. Another showed him boasting to a contact about how easily the Vaughns were manipulated. Each clip was a nail. Leo went pale. He looked wildly from the screen to Serafina, who stood impassive at the head table, her face carved from ice. "Serafina, this is insane," he hissed, his voice a desperate whisper. "They're hysterical. It's Caleb. He's poisoned their minds against me." Always me, the thought came, weary and final. The last resort of a cornered rat, blame the madman in the attic, the one variable you could never account for. Finally, it was Serafina's turn. She ascended the stage with the cold, deliberate grace of a predator. She didn't go to the podium. She stood center stage, a queen surveying the ruins of a coup. "My sisters have spoken of lies and sickness," she said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence of the ballroom. "I speak of treason. For the past 18 months, Vaughn Industries has been the victim of systematic corporate espionage and embezzlement, perpetrated by someone we trusted completely." She raised a remote, and the screens behind her lit up with a complex flowchart. At the center was Leo's face. Branching off from it were shell corporations, offshore accounts, and timelines of financial transfers that perfectly matched Vaughn Industries' capital investments. It was a meticulous, undeniable map of his betrayal. And at the very bottom, in bold, stark lettering, was the account number for Vaughn Global Acquisitions. My account number. The total sum stolen from this company, from our shareholders, and from the beneficiaries of this very foundation, Serafina announced, her voice ringing with cold fury, is $187 million. A collective gasp swept the room. The silence that followed was absolute. "But this was never just about money," Serafina continued, her eyes locking onto Leo's. "This was about a vendetta against our father, who, decades ago, outmaneuvered a business rival named Alistair Vance, a man who lost his company, his fortune, and his reputation." She paused, letting the name hang in the air. Alistair Vance was Leo's father. His real name is not Leo Vance. It is Leo Vance. If Leo had been pale before, he was now translucent. He stared at Serafina, his mouth agape, all charm and artifice stripped away, leaving only the raw, sputtering rage of a mastermind whose magnum opus had just gone up in flames. "The engagement is off," Serafina declared, her voice like the tolling of a bell. "The job offer is rescinded." She then looked past him to the back of the ballroom, where 2 uniformed police officers had just appeared. "And as the CEO of this company, I am pressing full charges." It was a checkmate. A public, brutal, and exquisitely choreographed checkmate. As the officers approached a stunned, sputtering Leo and the room erupted into a cacophony of camera flashes and frantic whispers, I just sat there. I watched the man who had destroyed my life be destroyed himself. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no joy, no relief. The ghost of the boy who had craved justice was long gone. I was just the empty vessel that had held the evidence. The performance was over. The audience was in shock, and all I wanted to do was go home, to a place that didn't exist anymore. Chapter 5. The CEO's Due Diligence. Serafina Vaughn did not deal in ghosts or premonitions. She dealt in balance sheets, market projections, and legally binding contracts. Her world was a fortress of logic and empirical data, and she was its undisputed queen. While Isabella wrestled with a medical impossibility and Annalise reeled from a spiritual crisis, Serafina approached the Caleb problem as she would a hostile takeover bid, with suspicion, due diligence, and a demand for irrefutable proof. She summoned her two younger sisters to her office, a sterile expanse of glass and chrome on the top floor of Vaughan Tower. It was a space that offered a panoramic view of the city, a concrete and steel testament to their family's power. "Let me be clear," Serafina began, her fingers steepled before her on the vast expanse of her desk. "Isabella, you are suggesting that our brother is psychically broadcasting his thoughts, a phenomenon for which there is zero scientific evidence. Annalise, you are suggesting that Leo, our most trusted advisor and my future fiancé, orchestrated a complex smear campaign against you based on a feeling you got from Caleb." "It's more than a feeling, Serafina," Annalise insisted, her voice tight. "He knew things, specifics, the burn phone, the humidor." "Did you check?" Serafina cut in, her tone sharp. "Did you go to his room and find this supposed phone?" "No, I was scared," Annalise admitted. "If he caught me—" "Exactly," Serafina said, a hint of her old condescension returning. "Allegations without evidence are nothing more than noise. They are liabilities. Right now, Caleb is the source of this noise, and Leo is the one who has consistently brought stability." "He predicted the pistachio incident," Isabella countered, her voice steady. "He knew about the switched scripts. He knew about Dr. Finch. The probability of him guessing all of those details is statistically zero." "Coincidence and conjecture are not data," Serafina shot back, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. The mention of Finch, their family's private tool for managing inconvenient narratives, had struck a nerve. The war for Serafina's soul was waged in the quiet hours of the night. Isabella and Annalise, now a united front, would find her, presenting their evidence. Annalise would recount the chilling accuracy of my mental warnings. Isabella would show her the anomalous brain scans, the medical journals, the desperate scrawlings of a scientist trying to map a miracle. But I remained the key, unwilling, uncooperative, broken. They started trying to use me. They would bring up topics in my presence, hoping to trigger a revelatory thought. They'd mention a new Vaughan Industries acquisition, a political donation, a corporate rival, watching me, listening for the mental alarm bells they now knew so well. I saw what they were doing. They were turning me into a human Geiger counter for Leo's treachery. "So this is the new arrangement," I thought bitterly one afternoon, as they discussed a shipping deal in the sunroom, their eyes fixed on me. "I'm not a brother, I'm an oracle, a tool. You don't want to save me. You want to use my trauma to protect yourselves. You want my pain to be your shield. The cage is the same, you've just redecorated it." The barb hit its mark. All three of them flinched. Annalise looked away in shame, while Isabella's face crumpled with a fresh wave of guilt. But Serafina's expression hardened. She was a pragmatist. If the tool worked, she would use it. The final piece of the puzzle, the irrefutable data point she required, came from a place she least expected. It came from me, but not in the way she intended. Leo had been spending more and more time with Serafina, solidifying his position not just in the family, but in the company. He was her shadow, her confidant, her partner in all but name. He had made himself indispensable. His endgame was approaching, a seat on the board, a marriage proposal, and the final, total absorption of the Vaughan empire. One evening, Serafina was in her home office, reviewing a quarterly report. Leo was with her, pointing to a series of figures on a screen, his voice a low, reassuring murmur. "And if we reroute the capital from the Singapore expansion through the Cayman Holding Company, we can minimize the tax burden by at least 12%. It's a standard aggressive growth strategy." I was passing by the open door, on my way to the kitchen for a glass of water, my own ghost haunting the hallways of my former home. I heard his words, and a memory, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of my depression. The Cayman Holding Company, my mind whispered, a fatal echo. Vaughan Global Acquisitions. That's what he calls it. It's not a holding company, it's a shell corporation. The account number is 717X4B2. It's his personal piggy bank. He's not minimizing the tax burden, he's siphoning the capital. He did this last time with the Berlin Expansion Fund. He bled it dry over 6 months. By the time the auditors noticed, the money was gone, laundered through 3 different countries, and he had already framed the chief financial officer for it. You signed the man's termination letter yourself, Serafina. You ruined an innocent man's life to protect a snake. Inside the office, the world stopped. I saw Serafina's hand freeze over her keyboard. Leo, mid-sentence, faltered as he saw the blood drain from her face. Serafina? Darling, are you all right? He asked, his voice thick with concern. She didn't answer him. Her glacial blue eyes lifted from the screen and met mine through the open doorway. The look in them was no longer one of skepticism or annoyance. It was the dawning, gut-wrenching terror of a logician staring at a miracle, of a queen realizing her most trusted general is a traitor. An account number. Not a feeling. Not a coincidence. Not a vague premonition. A specific, testable, 9-digit string of data. A detail so secret, so deeply buried in the corporate architecture that only 2 people in the world should have known it. The person who created the account and the person whose mind it was now echoing in. She didn't need to check. She didn't need a forensic accountant. In that single horrifying moment, she knew. She knew it all. The burn phone, the switched scripts, the pistachio-laced lamb, the ruination of an innocent CFO. All of it. The fortress of her logic had been breached, not by a battering ram, but by a single whispered key turning a lock deep inside her. She slowly turned her gaze back to Leo. Her expression was unreadable, a perfect corporate poker face. But I knew, and she knew, that she was no longer looking at her fiancé. She was looking at the enemy. Leo, she said, her voice impossibly calm, betraying none of the chaos raging within her. I have a new task for you. I need you to start planning the Vaughn Foundation Gala. This year, I want it to be unforgettable. Due diligence was complete. The CEO was convinced. And the retribution was now officially in the planning stages. Chapter 7. A Checkmate in Ashes. The fallout from the gala was a nuclear winter. The Vaughn name, once a symbol of unassailable power, was now synonymous with the year's most spectacular scandal. The business journals called Serafina's move a brutal corporate coup. The gossip columns painted a lurid picture of a family imploding. But within the cold, silent walls of the Vaughn estate, it was something else entirely. It was a reckoning. Leo was gone, swallowed by the maw of the legal system he had so deftly tried to manipulate. His downfall was absolute, his name a curse on the lips of the city's elite. The Vaughn empire, though shaken, was secure. Serafina, with ruthless efficiency, had already begun the process of damage control, cauterizing the wounds and reinforcing the walls of their corporate fortress. But the family was in ruins. The victory was hollow. The spoils nothing but ash. A week after the gala, they came to me, all 3 of them. I was in the library, the one room I had started to reclaim, not for the memories, but for the silence. They stood in the doorway, not as the titans of industry, medicine, and art, but as 3 broken women. The arrogance was gone, the certainty shattered. They were stripped bare, left with nothing but the gargantuan weight of their guilt. Caleb, Serafina started, her voice unnervingly soft. She held a thick portfolio bound in black leather. We've made some arrangements. The board has approved a transfer of assets. A controlling interest in the company is now in your name. All of it. The houses, the investments, the foundation, it's yours. Annalise stepped forward, her hands twisting in front of her. My production company, my endorsement deals. I'm liquidating everything. The money will be placed in a trust for you. It's the least I can do, a pathetic attempt at restitution for the platform I gave them to hurt you. Isabella was last. She didn't offer money or power. She held out a single, thin file. I've submitted my resignation to the hospital board. I've also submitted a full confession of my medical malpractice to the state licensing board. They will revoke my license permanently. I'll never practice medicine again. It's only right. They stood there offering me the broken pieces of their lives, their crowns laid at my feet. They were offering me the world they had denied me, the power they had used to crush me. They thought this was justice. They thought this was what I wanted. I looked from their faces, etched with desperation and a desperate, pleading hope, to the portfolio in Serafina's hands, and I felt a profound, soul-deep exhaustion. You still don't get it, the thought rose, not with anger, but with a deep, sorrowful pity. You think this was about the money? The company? You think I wanted to be king of this gilded cage? I didn't want your kingdom. I just wanted my brother back. The brother you three let die little by little, day by day, long before my heart finally gave out in that shack. The thought hit them like a physical wave. Serafina recoiled, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. Annalise let out a sob she couldn't contain, and Isabella just closed her eyes, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. They understood, finally. The wound wasn't financial, it was existential, and it could never be healed. I stood up and walked over to the large globe that sat in the corner of the library. I gave it a slow spin, watching the continents blur. I don't want the company, I said, my voice quiet, rusty from disuse. It felt strange to speak the words aloud when my thoughts had been screaming them for so long. I don't want the money, and I don't want your apologies. I stopped the globe with my finger, landing on a small island nation in the Pacific. A place of blue water and quiet shores, a place with no Vaughan Tower on its skyline. I want that, I said. Serafina looked at the portfolio in her hands, then back at me. But what will you do? Where will you go? I'm going to learn to breathe again, I thought. I'm going to walk on a beach and not think about my own funeral. I'm going to feel the sun on my face and not see it as the spotlight of an interrogation. I'm going to live a small, quiet, anonymous life, the life you all took from me. I turned to face them, the three most powerful women I knew, now looking so small, so lost. There's one more thing I need from you, a new name, a clean passport, a ticket. An hour later, I walked out of the Vaughan estate for the last time. I carried a single suitcase with a few changes of clothes and a book. I didn't look back. At the gate, a black car was waiting. Annalise had arranged it. The driver, a man I'd never seen before, took my bag and opened the door. As I got in, I felt a strange new silence. The hum, the constant, low-grade psychic static that had been the soundtrack to my second life, was fading. The connection, forged in trauma and guilt, was finally dissolving with distance, with forgiveness, or perhaps just with acceptance. For the first time, my mind was my own. The silence was terrifying, and it was beautiful. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the grand, imposing mansion behind. I knew what I was leaving. I was leaving three women to live out their days in a prison of their own making, forever haunted by the echoes of the thoughts they could no longer hear. They had their empire of ashes. They could keep it. I was free.
Epilogue: A King in a Concrete Kingdom. Leo's point of view. The world has shrunk to a 6 by 9 foot box of poured concrete and steel. My kingdom. The fluorescent light on the ceiling hums a single, monotonous note, a sound that has replaced the applause and the murmur of boardrooms. They let me keep books. A small mercy, designed to prevent the mind from turning to rot. I read Marcus Aurelius and Machiavelli. One teaches me how to endure my kingdom, the other reminds me how I lost it. My lawyers, inept fools from the firm Serafina herself recommended, tell me the evidence is insurmountable. They use words like irrefutable and overwhelming. They are wrong. All evidence is surmountable. Every fortress has a secret passage. I just haven't found this one yet. I spend my 23 hours a day of lockdown replaying the gala. I dissect every moment, every word, every frame of that perfectly executed assassination. The precision of it still astounds me. The burn phone. The Cayman account. My father's name. They knew everything. It wasn't a countermove, it was a preemptive strike based on impossible intelligence. Where did they get it? It's the question that keeps me from sleeping. It's the loose thread I pull at endlessly. I re-examine every interaction. Serafina, the Ice Queen, was too logical to act on a whim. Annalise, the emotional puppet, was too self-absorbed. Isabella, the scientist, was too grounded in provable facts. They were brilliant, yes, but they were predictable. Their motivations were clear: power, image, order. Nothing in their psychological profiles suggested this capacity for clairvoyance. Which leaves him. Caleb. The broken little bird. The ghost at the feast. I dismissed him. He was a non-factor, a piece I had already taken off the board in a previous game. He was the emotional collateral damage, The weeping boy whose paranoia was the perfect camouflage for my ascent. And yet, he was the fulcrum. The variable that changed the entire equation. They say he's gone. Vanished. Took a small payout and disappeared off the face of the earth. It doesn't make sense. A boy with that much leverage, with the keys to the entire Vaughn kingdom, doesn't just walk away. Unless the walking away was the victory. I close my eyes and picture him. Not the broken, weeping boy I cultivated, but the silent, watchful figure at the gala. His eyes. They were empty. Not with the emptiness of defeat, but the vast, calm emptiness of a concluded game. The look of a player who sees the entire board and has already calculated the final move. How? It's impossible. It defies logic. It defies the natural order of things. People like me, the intelligent, the ruthless, the ones who see the strings, we don't lose to people like him. We don't lose to ghosts. The guard slides a tray through the slot in my door. The clatter of metal on concrete is the chime of my new reality. I will have time. Years. Decades, perhaps. I will read. I will study. I will find the flaw in their logic, the source of their impossible knowledge. I will solve the puzzle of Caleb Vaughn. I am Leo Vance. I am smarter than all of them. This is not a checkmate. It is merely a setback. In this concrete kingdom, I will plan my return. A king, after all, is still a king, even in exile. Especially one who knows, with absolute certainty, that he should have won.